The freeholders have just been granted the right to take their challenge to the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act to the Court of Appeal. Today's video will do a quick reminder of what the reform is, how we got here, what this latest update is, and what the Court of Appeal may mean for leaseholders. Most importantly, what the consequences may be for leaseholders as well. I'm Josh. I'm here from Short Lease Property Sales. We are the specialist in short lease flats in the UK. If you have a short lease flat and you want some advice, then please feel free to be in touch. If you're thinking about selling a short lease flat, then get in touch and we can talk through what these consequences may mean for you specifically. But for everyone else, bringing us up to speed, the freeholders, as I said, have been granted permission to go to the Court of Appeal and appeal against that High Court decision from 2025. If you want a little more detail on how we got here, then there's a video on that on the channel. The higher courts ultimately had decided that the government's proposals from the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act, things like removing marriage value, things like going to a 900-year lease extension, things like removing ground rents, they decided that they were legal and could go ahead as planned. The freeholders' main argument against that was that these laws breach their human rights. And like I said, if you want more detail on how that can be true, then go back and watch the last video. It's something ultimately last year that the courts decided against, but their representations of the Court of Appeal have obviously proven enough merit that the Court of Appeal wants to hear them out, and they've granted permission for that appeal to go ahead. Now, the estimates on this process, there isn't a specific timeline for it, but the estimates on the process say that we're unlikely to have any news now from the Court of Appeal and this judgment until 2027. So we're another year further out from a bit more coherence and a bit more clarity on what could be happening with leaseholds, in particular short leases. And then to add to that, depending on the outcome from the Court of Appeal, there's the possibility of going one step further and taking it to the Supreme Court. And if it does go further, then projected timescales for that say probably actually 2028 is the timeline before we get to see any of this either coming into place or decided that actually the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act isn't worth the paper it's written on and it's not coming to fruition. So what does that mean? Well, the consequences for leaseholders. Well, it's very situation dependent. It's hard to say broad brush what it means for everyone. It depends on a couple of factors. One, your appetite to risk as a leaseholder. How much do you want to gamble on what the outcome could be? And I'll talk through that in a second. And secondly, what your time scale is. When do you need to extend by? When are you thinking about selling maybe? What else is going in your life that could impact the timings here? I will caveat all of this by saying this doesn't count as legal or financial advice. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a financial advisor, but here are some factors that might be worth considering. The easiest group to deal with is probably those of you who are looking to sell in the next 1 or 2 years, because given the timescales just laid out, there's a good chance that actually, even if the act does come into place, it's not going to benefit you in the next 1 or 2 years anyway. So if you're thinking about selling in the next 1 or 2 years, maybe selling sooner is the right thing to do, because obviously the longer your lease goes on, the shorter that term becomes, the more expensive it will be to renew based on the current calculations. So selling sooner makes it more appealing for buyers, less costly for you to do that lease extension if you're going to do it yourself, or less costly for a buyer if they're going to do it themselves, and therefore you get a higher price for your sale as a result. When we look at slightly longer timescales, let's say you're thinking about what to do in the next 5 years, that's when your appetite for risk plays more of a part. If you're feeling like the law is likely to be implemented as proposed without any sort of real negative changes through these appeals or through the process over the next couple of years, then you might say, okay, sure, I'm going to weigh up the increasing cost by my lease getting a couple of years shorter. However, I'm going to play that off against the hope that marriage value has disappeared in the next 2 years, and therefore overall my lease extension is getting cheaper. There is, of course, the risk that the appeal or the Supreme Court, wherever this ends up, comes down in favor of the freeholders and the government aren't able to make the changes as hoped. Therefore, all you've done is waited a couple of years and your lease extension has just got more expensive on the same basis as it's being calculated today. So that's one of the risks. The second risk is that, sure, marriage value may be removed, but also the government may introduce a standardized way of calculating lease extensions. And that could, you'd hope it wouldn't, but it could fall in a way where actually your lease extension gets more expensive in the future rather than less, even if marriage value is removed. Now, the main aim of removing marriage value, I think, is to make lease extensions cheaper and easier for people. However, you've got to think that these are possibilities. And that's where, like I said, your attitude to risk and your timescale does play a significant part. So hopefully that's been some useful information. If you do want some more specifics on your situation and your timescales and what the risks or the benefits might be for you, then happy to talk. Even if you're not thinking about selling right now, then still feel free to get in touch. Our contact details will be in the description or in and around this video. We hope to hear from you soon.